Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Lorna Gladstone.
My guest today on Books on Air is Bruce Jarvis, J-A-R-V as in Victor, I-S. And the name of his book is Codename, Archangel, The Demise of the Devil.
There you go.
Quite a wonderful, wonderful opening, I must say. And this is a very interesting novel for many reasons, one of which is that it's based on a true story. And it's the true story of a spy and of someone who never in a million years thought he was going to become a spy. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about the real person this is based on, whose name is, I believe, Carlton? What is his full name?
Carlton Fuller.
Carlton Fuller. And he worked with your dad, yes?
He worked with my dad and my uncle in my uncle's store. And when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I met the man personally. Just an ordinary guy, being a lawyer and a day-to-day job. It was after World War II, about 1946 or 47, when he was home. And he had come back to his job that he was doing before he was recruited by a gentleman by the name of William Donovan.
And who was he?
William Donovan was the forerunner of the manager of the CIA for the government. Roosevelt appointed him to gather all the information about Germany and what was going on in the world from all the different agencies in the government. Because at that time, each one gathered its own information and shared it with the president. Well, Roosevelt wasn't happy with that. He appointed Donovan, who was a personal friend of one of Roosevelt's friends.
And why did Donovan contact Carlton?
Well, he contacted Carlton because of Carlton's background. Carlton and his mother emigrated from Germany when Carlton was very young. And he had a German background, was brought up in Germany, and the English let Donovan know they had vetted this guy and let Donovan know that he was a potential opportunity to take advantage of it.
Solely because he was a native German, spoke German fluently, I assume.
Yes, he did.
With no accent or anything like that. And was it also because in the vetting he was found to be very smart, very reliable, or were there other qualities that they looked at and liked?
Well, when the British vetted him, they knew he was a lawyer. And of course, lawyers have different qualities and are trained differently than most people. So they felt he might be a good contact. And of course, Donovan was very interested in starting to fulfill the beginning of the CIA. And it wasn't called the CIA at that time. But he was interested in starting to fill jobs, even though the United States was not at war and was a country which didn't want to be involved.
So let's jump a little bit ahead.
Okay.
Donovan goes to him and tells him what?
Well, he calls him and tells him he would like to talk to him. Of course, Carlton hangs up the phone and thinks Donovan is a jerk the first time it rings. He's painting the inside of his porch, and he's on a ladder, and he has to get down, and his wife asks him to answer the phone. Well, he was not happy. And he called Donovan his jerk and hung up the phone.
But when they started talking, what did Donovan propose to him?
Well, Donovan, first of all, called back and tells him, look, if you don't talk to me, I'm a very persistent guy. I'll keep calling you. Well, the lawyer instinct in Carlton got him to say, well, what do you want to talk about? Well, that's when Donovan tells him, I'm interested in you becoming part of my organization because of your background.
Did Donovan tell him that he wanted him to become a spy?
No, he did not tell him that at first.
Not initially. Okay,
No.
so let's move on to when Carlton understood what he was being recruited for and that it was as a spy. And why did he accept that? And then once accepted, what kind of training did he have subsequently to be a spy?
To make a long story short, Carlton did not know he was going to be a spy until after his training as a spy. Donovan didn't tell him what his mission was until after his training. He knew the training was for spies, but he didn't know what his mission was. The British had put together a spy school, but the first thing Donovan wanted Carlton to do was to become an officer in the United States Army. So he went to officers training school in New Jersey, graduated from that, then went to Great Britain to learn to be a spy, which their training included all sorts of different issues. And then he went to the American Spy School.
That's incredible. That's how many years were there approximately in the total training?
Well, almost a year. And while he was in Great Britain, he was vetted by the British, which was a very interesting story. But it's a separate story about he's being vetted by a woman.
This is why one has to read the book. You have to, because it's so rich. Yes.
Absolutely. But it's a very interesting piece of the story. So anyhow, he gets back from his training in Ontario, where the United States Spy School was. It was set up by the British. And he finds out at the airport with his friend, Major Best, who has been with Carlton from the beginning. Major Best was Donovan's driver, worked for Donovan, and kind of like, you could say, a mentor, so to speak. He became a good friend, and he met Donovan at the airport when he came back from Ontario, where the American Spy School was. So he comes back. Major Best pulls him into this room, and in comes a gentleman by the name of David Bruce, who worked for Donovan. Bruce sits down with him, and he says, the first thing our guy wants to know is, what's my mission? Bruce looks at him, he says, well, we're going to tell you now. What we want you to do is to go to Germany and replace your brother.
And what does that mean? His brother had been left in Germany?
His brother is in Germany.
Never came to the U.S. with the mother?
Never came with the mother, which is a separate part of the story.
And about what ages are they? The two brothers, are they about the same age?
They're the same age. As it happens to be, they're twins.
They're twins. That's what I was really getting at. They're twins. Incredible. Already, it's amazing. So he's recruited in part because his brother, his twin brother, is already high up in the German army.
His brother is a full colonel working for one of the German higher-ups by the name of Alfred Jodl.
Let's get to the meat of this. How in the world does he replace his brother? And given that his brother has stayed in Germany and has worked his way up to a high position, how does his brother agree to this?
Well, prior to going to school to become a spy, during the conversation with Donovan, initially in the book, Carlton gets a call via his mother, who is here in the United States, living here too. Gets a phone call from him saying that your father has had a stroke. Now, his father is in Germany. And would you please go, and he wants to talk to you. I heard from your brother, Horst, and he called and said, your father's ill. He's dying. He wants to talk to you before he passes on. Please come to Germany. You can stay at my house. Well, of course, Donovan tells his mother, who's in tears, that he'll try to get to Germany, but she has to understand there's a war in Europe, and that getting the United States to let him go during the war would be very difficult. He'd have to find out how much it cost. He'd have to get a passport. He'd have to get approval from the government, but he would try. So he goes home and he tells his wife. Well, he hadn't made a decision yet as to whether he would work for Donovan, but he talks to his wife about it. And she says, well, your good friend Donovan should be able to help you. Maybe he can do it for you to get you over there to visit your father before he passes away.
So this all works out, and he makes a family trip to Germany to see his dying father, meet with his brother, but he has not at this point been trained as a spy. No. So it's not as if he goes over and says to his brother, would you consider this? This is all just coincidental.
This is all in the beginning of the book, so, the first couple of chapters.
So he comes back, trains as a spy, and how does the switch of brothers occur? And then we're going to have to move on to what his mission really is. And I say again, buy this book. It is incredible. Go ahead.
There's a little bit that we need to talk about before we go on to how it happens. The important thing is that he and his wife get to go to Germany. Donovan thinks it's a great idea. Of course, he has some ideas as to what he's going to do.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to send it. So he puts him on a diplomatic passport, sends him over as a diplomat, and he goes over and stays at his brother's house because the British just happened to be bombing Berlin and bomb the embassy. So he can't get and stay at the embassy with our charge d'affaires. So he goes and he visits and he meets the family. He meets Horst, who he hadn't seen in 20 years, and meets his wife, Hildegard. They go to the hospital to visit the dad. The father tells him why he and his mother broke up and that he was sorry and he apologized for that. And his father finally dies while they're there. There's a big German funeral. They have a big march to celebrate his father because his father helped put together, he was one of the first Nazis to support Hitler. He put together the beginning of the youth corps of the Nazis.
Okay. So this is a highly embedded German family.
Oh, very much so.
Okay, so he comes home.
Well, he meets all the family and all of the workers that are working in the family, the servants, and one of which is a young German girl named Sarah, who the wife falls in love with. Hildegard is trying to adopt as a daughter. Hildegard and Horst have no children. But anyhow, the family falls in love with Sarah and the other servants, who are all Jewish, as it turns out. They're living in a Jewish house, which the Germans absconded with. And they go and visit. The wife takes Hildegard on a visit of Berlin and takes him to some terrible places where the Jews are killed and the Jews are put on the train to go to the concentration camps. But anyhow, they go to the funeral and they come home. Of course, Donovan gives each one of them a mission. They have to come back and he has to get that information from he and the wife, which they agreed to do since he paid all the bills. And they come home. Well, still not asked to be a spy, but Donovan starts to put the pressure on. Well, a year after Donovan's first phone call, something happens in Germany that causes our boy to make his mind up. They get a phone call from Major Best, who comes to visit them, and he says, Hildegard went to the embassy.